Shower crossing the area, 70 degrees. Next news, 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by CharlesEquipment.com, keeping you powered up no matter what the conditions.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. President Trump's 35-minute interview with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press over the weekend covered a lot of topics, spent a good deal of time on Iran and President Trump's decision to no-go the retaliatory strike after the Iranians downed a U.S. drone. He explained why.
Nothing is green-lighted until the very end because things change, right?
So you never gave a final order?
No. But we had something ready to go subject to my approval. And they came in, and they came in about a half an hour before. They said, sir, we're about ready to go. I said, I want a better
planes
definition.
In the air? Were planes in the air?
We're about ready to go.
Yeah.
No, but they would have been pretty soon. And things would have happened to a point where you wouldn't turn back or couldn't turn back. So they came and they said, sir, we're ready to go. We'd like a decision. I said, I want to know something before you go. How many people will be killed? In this case, Iranians. I said, how many people are going to be killed? Sir, I'd like to get back to you on that. Great people, these generals. They said, came back, said, sir, approximately 150. And I thought about it for a second. I said, you know what? They shot down an unmanned drone, plane, whatever you want to call it. And here we are sitting with 150 dead people. That would have taken place probably within a half an hour after I said go ahead, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was proportionate.
And President Trump had a message to those who thought a President Trump would mean World War III. Remember that line of argumentation from Hillary and others, and frankly, it's ongoing.
We're going to be in World War III the first week. Didn't work out that way. We're doing great in North Korea. We're doing great in a lot of different places. We knocked out the caliphate in Syria. We knocked out 100%. Remember, I was going to leave
Not
it.
100%. Not everybody says it's 100%.
The caliphate.
Okay.
No, the caliphate, which is the land, the area,
fair enough,
is 100%. You never knock these people out. These people are stone cold crazy, and they're.
And his message to Iran:
I'm not looking for war. And if there is, it'll be obliteration like you've never seen before. But I'm not looking to do that. But you can't have a nuclear weapon. You want to talk good, otherwise you can have a bad economy for the next 3 years.
Trump also had some words about his advisors, characterizing some as doves and some as not so doves.
I have doves and I have hawks.
Yeah, you have some serious
hawks. I have
hawks.
some hawks. Yeah, John Bolton is absolutely a hawk. It's up to him. He'd take on the whole world at one time, okay? But that doesn't matter. Because I want both sides. You know, some people said, why did you put, I was against going into Iraq for years and years. And before it ever happened, I was against going into Iraq. And some people said, oh, I don't know. I was totally against. And I was a private citizen. It never made sense to me. I was against going into the Middle East. Chuck, we've spent $7 trillion in the Middle East right now.
And even in, Jerusalem, Bolton defended Trump's decision to cancel the Iranian airstrike.
Neither Iran nor any other hostile actor should mistake U.S. prudence and discretion for weakness. No one has granted them a hunting license in the Middle East.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And in addition, since so much focus by the chattering class on John Bolton and Trump's advisors, Trump also went against Lindsey Graham, went against Tom Cotton, who suggested that, frankly, the attack on the commercial oil vessels
was enough to go to war over.
Well, not go to
war, but
issue a retaliatory military strike, take out the Iranian Navy, take out some of their oil-producing facilities. Right. So Trump is exercising great restraint here, and it is, frankly, the left who is hysterical with respect to the prospect that he's going to use a Pagliacci phrase, bumble us into war. Nothing of the sort. And one other matter I wanted to reference before we bring on our friend Michael Rubin, because I want him to address this for us. Jared Kushner sat down with Reuters over the weekend as well. Trump was tackling Todd, and Jared was tackling Reuters with respect to his the administration's plan for peace in the Middle East, the economic component to it. And here's what the administration is proposing, as Jared explained.
The plan would invest about $50 billion in the region. It would create 1 million jobs in the West Bank and Gaza. It would take their unemployment rate from about 30% to single digits. It would reduce their poverty rate by half if it's implemented correctly. It's a 10-year plan. It would double their GDP. The reason we're calling this a workshop and not a conference is because we want to get feedback and hopefully finalize it so that we can then coordinate a lot of the aid efforts and investing efforts to really drive results.
This is a workshop coming up in Bahrain, I believe, with the representatives of the principals here in the Middle East. And so this is most of the money. He said more than half would go to West Bank and Gaza, and it's really a Marshall Plan model for the Middle East, sort of, really for Palestinians.
Though a lot of people who have peer-reviewed it have said that it does resemble the Marshall Plan. I've been reading more about the Marshall Plan, and one of the things that they did very successfully was they didn't just give aid, they infused money into the private sector, and they created an environment where businesses can thrive, capital could be invested. This is a similar notion where you're not just giving people fish like we've been doing here for a long time. You're teaching them to fish, and then you're buying them fishing rods, and you're helping them become something that will be much more sustainable, because the current status quo is not a sustainable situation, and I think everyone agrees on that.
Yeah, and I don't know that this proposal is going to alter that status quo. By the way, the Marshall Plan for the Palestinians, already rejected by the Palestinians. Michael Rubin, he is resident scholar for the American Enterprise Institute, author of books including Dancing with the Devil and Kurdistan Rising. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So why don't we start with what Jared Kushner had to say about this Marshall Plan for the Middle East, but most specifically the West Bank and Gaza?
Well, Jared Kushner is absolutely right that there would need to be an economic Marshall Plan of some sort. But there's a lot of places in the world that could use this money. It's not clear that the Palestinians have the capacity to use it in terms of combating corruption and so forth. And as Abba Eban, the former Israeli diplomat, said, the Palestinians have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I think what we see going on here isn't a notion that, the Palestinians can hold out for something better. The world's being very generous with them. It's rather the Trump administration is seeing whether the Palestinians would take economic development in addition to a broader peace plan. If the answer is no, if the answer is boycott everything, then I suspect they're just going to turn their back completely to the problem.
So transitioning to Iran, what did you make of President Trump's decision to not greenlight the retaliatory strike?
In this case, I thought it was wise, and the reason is this. The maximum pressure campaign against Iran, the economic sanctions, are taking great effect. Most Iranians don't particularly care for their government, and frankly, most Iranians blame their government for the failure of their economy rather than blame the United States. Remember, the Iranian economy has been going south for 40 years. You have Turkey next door, which has the same population. Iran has oil, Turkey doesn't. Turkey has the much better economy. The thing is, most Iranians are fiercely nationalistic, and so what I thought was going on is the Iranians are trying to almost goad us into a strike so that they can rally their people around the flag. We don't want that to. We want to deny them that ability as we keep the pressure up, and hopefully this regime will then face true accountability.
And we're not going to, retaliate with an airstrike, but new sanctions begin today. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
Amy, I think it is tightening up the. We are tightening the vice on Iran, if you will, and ultimately we already see that these sanctions are having impact. The question is whether sanctions alone are going to be enough to change Iranian behavior. But remember, when people say, hey, pressure can't work on Iran, that's something the Obama administration often says, or the alumni of the Obama administration often say, Amy. That's simply not true, because we've seen Iran reverse course, both with what it would take to release the American hostages back in 1981 and what it would take to end the Iran-Iraq war. Sometimes pressure and isolation does very much work on Iran.
We also hear that it's reporting that on Thursday evening, U.S. Cyber Command did launch a retaliatory digital strike against an Iranian spy group that supported the mine attacks on those commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So, the administration may have decided not to launch missiles to take out the Iranian Navy, but they did act digitally.
Well, you're absolutely right. And what really strikes me, Dan, is some people will say, hey, we shouldn't be doing a cyber strategy against Iran. We shouldn't be having sanctions against Iran. But when you look at the whole panoply of options available, you have, of course, peace and trade and so forth. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have war. If you take away every option in between, sanctions, cyber, nonviolent cyber options, and so forth, basically what you're doing is reducing President Trump's choices and making war more imminent. So, if we have other strategies that can put pressure on Iran short of military strikes, I'm all for them.
There's a piece in Politico from a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations that suggests that the real reason Iran is provoking Trump is not because they want war, it's because they want to talk. He writes, having studied the regime for decades, I believe the purpose of all this is not to start a war with America. More likely, it's to enter talks with Washington, claiming to be the empowered party that has withstood America's strategy of maximum pressure. They need a story of success to come to the table, which is what they really want to do, but they can't come from a perception of weakness.
Let me flip that on its head for a second, Dan. We've seen a situation where the Iranians normally provoke, and when they're on the verge of facing accountability, they will offer an option for talks, and people will grasp onto it. In 1996, the Iranians, according to the FBI investigation, were responsible for the Khobar Towers attack in eastern Saudi Arabia, which killed 19 U.S. servicemen. When we were on the verge of an attack there, of retaliation, then we had the Iranians start talking about dialogue of civilizations, and the Clinton administration put any chance of retaliation on the back burner, and eventually it faded away. We're seeing a similar situation here, I think, where the Iranians are offering the opportunity for talks, if only so that they don't have to be accountable for their own actions.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, good perspective on that. Let me tackle another geopolitical issue with you, and that's border security and humanitarian aid at the border. President Trump was going to, did apparently, Greenlight ICE moves to deport some 2,000 of some more than 1 million people who've had court-issued deportation orders filed against them. That was going to happen on Sunday in major urban centers around the country. But per reportedly a call from Nancy Pelosi asking him not to do this, to continue talking about what to do at the border, he's delayed that for 2 weeks. Is that a cave by President Trump similar to what I would argue the government shutdown cave over border security funding was back the first part of the year?
The answer to that, Dan, is we will see in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons why Trump is making inroads among potential Hispanic voters is simply because he is taking a harder line for those who are here illegally versus those who are here legally. People forget this isn't just a debate about immigration. Many people support immigration, many Republicans and many Democrats. It's a debate about whether American laws mean anything, whether we're going to prioritize line jumpers over those who actually abide by U.S. law, and that ultimately is going to be the question by which we can judge whether Trump is caving or whether Trump is actually going to defend American sovereignty and American law.
But don't you think President Trump looks weak by going back on his word? He had a set plan. This Sunday, these are the towns we're going in to get 2,000 people, Chicago being one of them, Los Angeles, Miami, Baltimore. And then he backs out to have more conversation with Nancy Pelosi. I feel like we've been working on border security and border issues for 40-plus years.
To some extent, yeah, Amy, I do think it makes him look a little bit weak, but this is the sort of bluster that you and I and any others who watch Trump regularly see, that Trump will always take a harder line. At the last minute, he's going to back off a little bit. It's part of the Trump pattern. Then the question comes whether he's going to stick by his word at all or simply fade away. So we will see in 2 weeks. He's given himself time. But ultimately, the most humane thing when it comes to taking care and addressing this problem isn't to allow illegal immigrants into the country in the first place. And ultimately, if someone is being released on their own recognizance and doesn't show up at court, there should be absolutely no excuse for this. And I think the ultimate question has to come not just to Trump, but also to Nancy Pelosi. Why would you defend someone that skips a court appearance?
Yeah, I mean, I think President Trump